if you have comments that you would like to make, you have three choices. You can put them in the chat, you can record them on the mural board yourself, or you can say them out loud, and we will want to be having a discussion. We're going to spend the first 25 minutes or half an hour or so on the first mural board. As I said, I have put the link to the mural board in the chat, so you can click on that link, and that will take you directly to the board that we're talking about today, with just some seed actions in there, we can start talking about it. So for buildings, we're trying to solve for GHG, greenhouse gas reduction, equity, wildfire and air quality, heat, flooding, and drought. And the four columns are energy efficiency and indoor air quality, switching from natural gas to electricity, renewable energy and battery storage, and then other, almost anything that you want to talk about related to buildings or not. I can see a lot of the people on the in the workshop are moving around on the board and starting to think about making some comments. And I would welcome suggestions from people. So you can use the raise hand function, or even just raise your actual hand. So, and Jennifer has started screen sharing the mural board that we're looking at, so you can see that. So anybody have any thoughts about buildings? So if we look at switching from natural gas to electricity, some of the comments that are already up there are, you know, one of the big barriers is people not feeling that they want to use induction cooking for their cooking, which is an electric approach to cooking. So perhaps to remove that barrier, we need to have more resources for induction cooking and test kitchens, giving people the opportunity to use induction and recognize the value of it for being a good way to cook. Any thoughts about that or comments? I know we have some people in the meeting that actually have been designing or installing induction cooking. So your thoughts are welcome.
Yeah.
Carrie,
oh wait, am I on? Yes.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, just I talk to a lot of people who really love the idea of cooking with gas, and it's like and also putting in gas burning fireplaces, and so I guess to get past that, it's going to require a lot of education and a lot of a lot of marketing, I guess, is really what it comes down to. And just curious as to is there a marketing budget for this as part of that? Does the city have any kind of money set aside for that? Because it's really going to be a social pressure, and it's got to come from a lot of different angles, and it has to be top of mind. Otherwise, people are always going to gravitate towards those gas burning appliances.
Mm-hmm. Well, we do have, it's a really good thought, Ken, and we do have starting with a REACH code for new development that incentivizes new projects to be all electric rather than installing natural gas at all. And that has been somewhat successful. And so there are going to be more new homes in residential properties in Davis that do have induction cooking. And I think that word of mouth is a really good way to start. Additionally, in response to your comment about funding, part of the identification of actions in the CAP is to identify how we are going to be able to implement these actions. And that could be through working with partners such as Valley Climate Action Center that purchased some induction cooktops to do demonstrations, or working with Cool Davis for outreach, or getting funding either through grants or other programs. So we want to make sure that this plan is an implementable plan. And I don't have the actual answers for you at this point, but there are a range of different ways that we can try to make that happen. And like you say, people talking to people is an important component of that. So other thoughts? I see a lot of comments going up on the board now, so that's very exciting. Is there anything anybody wants to talk about instead of me picking out a comment?
Can I just mention that on the cooktop thing, when I was getting ready to buy a new one, I had a friend that had just a portable single induction cooktop that you could plug in, and he lent that to me, and I was like, oh my gosh, this works. This is great. So being able to bring it home, use it for a while instead of just like having to show up, add a demonstration, yada, yada, yada. It seems like through the library or something, or designers and, design build people could have, sets like that, few pots and pans with a burner to hand over to lend out to clients, so that they could try it out, during the design phase of projects. I think remodeling projects could be really cost effective and persuasive.
Well, thanks for that, Bernadette. I think that identifying what the barriers are and addressing some of those barriers is a really important way to address many issues that we want to make behavioral changes about. And, this relates to one of the comments that we've heard in our next topic, waste and water, having like tool libraries or appliance libraries or things like that. So that's another way that we can do that. If we go to talk about energy efficiency and indoor air quality, I'm seeing, again, education and outreach for cooling and pre-cooling. That's kind of what we're talking about with education about the electric appliances, more information about some of the easy, no-cost things that you can do, like opening your windows at night and putting down shades. I see another comment at the bottom of the energy efficiency. And that, in what we've heard in other workshops, can be both low-income residents that own their own home and those that rent. So those are some things that we need to talk about and think about in the climate action plan. But instead of me talking, I'd love to hear some comments from all of you, either that's something that's already been put on the boards or something that you would like on the board.
Hi, Carrie. This
Leslie
is Leslie.
has her hand up.
Thanks, Benjamin. Yeah, that's helpful to raise your hand so we know we don't end up talking over each other. So I wanted to piggyback a little bit on Bernadette's idea. Maybe the co-op and other kitchen equipped facilities and businesses could do demonstrations with portable induction cooktops. That would be a great way to do that. And to sort of follow up on the marketing question that Ken asked, and just to be clear about Cool Davis's role, Cool Davis works with the city very closely, and we already have been providing information about most of these topics. So if you're not already aware of us, please go to our website, cooldavis.org. There's an article about induction cooktops there. And I just wanted to be clear that the city and Cool Davis work together on marketing and outreach. So that's part of this picture.
Great, thank you. And we have talked with the co-op at previous times, and it's not just about induction cooking, but some of their comments were, you can use rice cookers, which is an electric appliance that doesn't take too much energy. And there are many, many things that you can do with other electric appliances. So if you're talking about students or renters or different things, you can be informing people of different ways and, again, have that library. So I think there are a lot of great ideas about how we can do cooking. And maybe we should talk a little bit about renewable energy and battery storage. Are there some thoughts that people have about that related to buildings?
Carrie, I'd like to actually ask about the induction cooktops.
Mhm.
While we're still, before we move on. So one of the things that I had read about when looking into it for myself was that it was an issue with canning.
An issue with what? I'm sorry?
With canning, with home canning.
Okay.
And so I've more recently looked into it, and it seems like it's okay now, but there's certain equipment that's all right, and some equipment that's not. But that was the only thing that seemed to be a disincentive, was that people's home canning equipment might not work with the induction cooktops, or that originally apparently I think it was the USDA recommendations were to not use induction cooking for canning, and I'm wondering if those recommendations have changed, and if that's something. I don't know, maybe that's an area that the education could happen in. If it has changed, maybe there's incentives for replacing canning equipment, etc.
I have no information about that. I do know that you need specific types of cookware to use on induction stovetops. It's not necessarily a barrier because the appropriate cookware is not extraordinarily expensive. Canning, I don't know. I don't know if the issue is heat that's generated or the equipment that's used. I'm not really sure about that. So that's something we maybe can look into further. Really, go ahead. Who's that?
I would just like to point out that, if we just use our imagination slightly, I mean, I got an induction stove. I'm a canner. So now I have a plug-in portable one, and I can actually do my canning outside on my patio, so I'm not heating up the house, and it's really easy to do that. So I don't feel like it's that difficult to get over these small little obstacles and do significant change. I don't know. There.
Well, thank you for that. There seems to be a lot of interest in induction stovetop cooking. I'd like to move on to the renewable energy battery storage topic, and we can always come back to induction cooking if that's what people want to talk about. But I do see a comment at the bottom of the screen on renewable energy about encouraging electric car owners to charge when the sun is out and then feed the electricity into the grid in the evening. Another option is to have like a two-way storage for electric car charging, so you can actually potentially in the future use your electric vehicle as your battery storage. So that's a really interesting idea, that you've got this big metal thing in your carport or garage that can then feed energy into your house. So I'm wondering if people have other thoughts about renewable energy at home, battery storage, and electric vehicles. I also see that some people have added some comments into the chat. Gary noted that Tesla does not allow two-way charging, so that may be another barrier that needs to be overcome. One thing I will say is I think that many of these topics are evolving very rapidly, and so we may need to continue to be monitoring what the current status is. I'm very, very pleased to see all of the comments on the mural board. I would love to have some of you speak up about either what you've seen that you agree with, or new thoughts you have, or something that you put into the board. So if you either haven't had a chance to put a comment on the board, or you see something that you're interested in, raise your hand, and we'd love to hear from you.
I guess I'd be interested in raising the question about incentives and funding, because that seems to be a thread that runs through quite a bit of this. A lot of this involves acquiring new equipment and or investing in education and outreach. And there is a suggestion about public funding or some sort of public mechanism for funding. So I think that would be an interesting topic.
Yes, Larry. You have to unmute yourself. Larry,
there we go. Got it. I got it. I've recently had to put a small window air conditioning in after using evaporative cooling for many, many years. That's the first time I've had to switch. It's because, and that's going to increase energy consumption, and a lot of other people may be turning to this same tactic because last year's smoke was really bad, and an evaporative cooler only works because you have to take outside air and put it through a water-soaked pad to enter the room. So it's not good to breathe all that smoke, and I haven't had to use it much. And I've used a squirrel cage fan in the window, powerful one, to act as an all-house fan because we've had delta breezes, fortunately, during these heat waves. But I can see a point where the savings of using 1/7 the energy of an air conditioner might have to be put aside if these fires in California continue, which will be increased energy consumption. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a really important comment because we do have overlapping and competing issues that we need to deal with. So it's really hard to pre-cool your house by opening the windows if you can't breathe because it's too smoky outside. So you have to seal yourself in, and that is problematic. So I think that's an important comment. And back to what Leslie had said earlier, I think that funding and implementation incentives, grants, all of those things are really important components that we need to address as we start to select these options. So just to clarify, we are right now creating a long running list of many, many ideas that we may want to use. And then we are going to go through an evaluation process of which ideas are the most equitable and the most able to be implemented, and we have local control and can fund them and are supported by the community, among other issues. And we will select a suite of actions that we can show will help take us to maximum carbon reduction by 2030, address climate risks, and get to carbon neutrality by 2040 at the latest. So that's what we're doing right now, is just gathering all these ideas. We're not saying, how can you do them? How can you fund them? That's going to be part of the evaluation process. So all of these comments are really important, but right now we're just gathering our long, long list, if that makes sense. So other thoughts or comments, maybe from somebody who hasn't had a chance to speak up yet? I know we have some people on this call that have great ideas, so I want to hear from you. How about if we talk about some of the issues under other ideas? I mean, some of these things like increasing cool roofs and reflective surfaces like paving, that's a very important idea. Talking about landlords and the split incentive of owning property but not living in it. So how do we get rental properties to get energy efficiency upgrades? Offering how-to classes for residents, giving low-income households priority. I'm just reading a few that I can see here. Thoughts on some of those ideas? Jennifer? Okay, another idea I see here is shade tree planting, and especially climate-ready trees. I think that's a very important concept. You know, that what we're talking about with the changes in our climate are also impacting not only the people in our climate, but the trees and plants in our climate. So we're having to modify the types of trees that we select and make sure that they're going to survive as our weather changes with longer drought periods, hotter temperatures that last longer, etc. Come on, guys, let's hear from you. Shall I call on some people? Gary, I know I spoke with you at one of the farmers markets. Do you have some thoughts on some of these building issues?
I will say
sure.
there's.
Oh, it's a different Gary. Okay, I'm sorry.
Go ahead, Gary. Go ahead.
Oh, okay. Yeah, a few thoughts on the electrification issue. My sense is that we need to look more seriously at heating because that's the largest gas use, especially in the wintertime, obviously. And heat pumps are a good, efficient solution, but I'm getting from some of the folk who do air systems that the heat pumps only bring up the temperature to 89 degrees. And so what you see is some dissatisfaction with that kind of product. And my sense is you have to pair that with enhanced insulation, and it's more complicated and needs more information. It's pretty simple to do an induction stovetop, but it really doesn't buy you much in terms of gas reduction compared to really thinking through the heating systems, which are much more complex to do. In terms of cool roofs and building albedo, my sense there is that the city could require cool roofs sooner rather than later, and that I'm seeing flat out black roofs being installed. I talked to one guy who put one on. He said, I'm just going to compensate by putting in a bigger air conditioner. I like black. I'm not certain that the city shouldn't be getting to that soon because it's simple to do. So those are the comments on electrification.
Thank you, Gary. And I will note a couple things. The City of Davis does have a cool roof requirement. So if you saw non-cool roofs or black roofs going in Davis, that was not according to code, and perhaps it was a surface that was cooling in some other way, I'm not sure, or maybe it was in another community. And as Leslie had mentioned earlier, another thought is that talking about our partnership with Cool Davis, there is a workshop tomorrow. Leslie, you can give us the specific time on home energy. So making a plan for your home energy, including your heating and cooling systems. So that is available, and the website has a lot of information.
Yeah, Carrie, so this Sunday at 2 p.m., I just dropped the link to register in the chat, is a workshop basically focused on electrification of homes, but also generally heating and cooling equipment in your home. So great resource, lots of experts and ideas going to be batted about there.
Thank you. I also see some comments in the chat about Elizabeth commented on the difficulty of people who are on submeters, such as, for example, perhaps at Rancho Yolo, and that there are limitations for being able to have solar at individual residences. So not only are the submeters an issue, according to Elizabeth's comment, but also some of the roofs are not able to support heavier solar panels. So to make that a more equitable approach to solar, we have to look at some other solutions that take those things into consideration. And Elizabeth's other comment is, can we install energy producing tiles that bikes and pedestrians can walk or bike over and that add to the energy grid? And I think that this is an evolving area. I know 10 years ago, I was doing some tours on renewable energy in Germany, and there are windows and wall materials and paving materials and tunnel fan systems, all that can produce electricity and add power to the grid. So as those things begin to become more commercially available, we may need to be taking a look at that and figuring out what the highest value, for example, for our pavements are, or our walls. Is the highest value to have green walls and have plants on them, or is it to have energy producing walls or different things. I don't have an answer. I just know that new technology is out there. So thanks for those comments, Elizabeth.
Yeah, this is Richard. I just wanted to follow up on Elizabeth's comment about Rancho Seco. There's quite a few mobile home parks in the state, and actually the parks in Davis may be looking at this of installing community solar that it supplies all of the residents in the park in order to solve the problems that she identified. So that's actually something that's happening down that front.
Great. And that really brings up the other issue, is that we don't have to have new solutions for everything. We can build on what is happening elsewhere in the region, the state, and the country. I see both Scott and Ying have their hands up. So Scott, can we hear from you? And then...
Thanks, Carrie. I appreciate it. And good to have the conference going. I guess that I want to point out a couple of large economic drivers for that built environment. One is that we have emphasized freestanding single-family homes, and I just don't think that in a post fossil fuel era, we're really can continue to emphasize those in any community, let alone Davis. And unfortunately, Davis has married itself very, very solidly to that model of normalcy. So I don't know what you want to do about it, but that's not gonna work. And the second part is that people who invested, or families and corporations who have invested in property in Davis and created rental fiefdoms are really reaping an incredible amount of money. Not, it costs a lot for new landlords to make it, but people who've been around a long time are exacting a huge economic profit. And I think that it's right that those folks that have a certain amount of profitability put that money back into making their properties stellar energy efficiency models. So just those two comments.
Thank you so much. And Ying.
Yeah, hello, Carrie. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Great. Yes, I'm Ying, and I'm newly appointed to the Finance and Budget Commission in the city of Davis.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm interested in the impacts of climate action and adaptation plan on finance and budget. So the other day when I stepped out of the manor pool, I saw a guy who was advertising, asking people to grow a shade tree on their pedestrian area. So he is a contractor from the city of Davis. He said they use a grant from Sacramento. So do you know the background of this kind of funding and about the contractor or something background story about it? I didn't get a chance to talk more with that guy. Do you know anything about it?
I don't think I do. Diana, are you familiar with that?
No, I am not. I have not heard of that.
It sounds remotely like it could be a Tree Davis program.
Yes, I saw I saw something similar on his shirt. So
go to their website, treedavis.org.
Okay.
So the Tree Davis program is not a grant; it's providing tree. Well, that's not true. Tree Davis and Cool Davis together received a grant to plant 1,000 trees in the city of Davis, and the individual homeowners that are receiving the trees are receiving trees, not the grant. That's what sort of threw me off. So, and that program has planted, I don't know the exact number now, but I think it's like 700 trees at this point, and we'll be finishing that out this year as far as I know. But you should be able to go either to the Tree Davis website or the City of Davis Urban Forestry website. And although that's a tree issue, it's also a climate issue. So thank you for bringing that up.
Yes, and I just feel like there are so many sources of grants from Sacramento, even federal programs, state level, and then these grants can be used by City of Davis to solve our climate action funding problems if there is any, and just think of those transportation in and out Davis. Those problems are not just Davis problem. It's can benefit the whole area. So I'm thinking of maybe making a collection of at least the source of those grants programs that can be used, can be applied in the climate action and adaptation plan of Davis. So just I came across a nonprofit organization. They help cities to manage their stormwater. So I think the basic idea is to reserve, kind of store the water during the storms, and then it can be used when there is drought, and can be used for watering the plants, trees, and so it's just a kind of a more sustainable way of managing stormwater. And they use funding from private sector. There are foundations that are interested in this area. So I'm just thinking, these kind of grants are not just in government, also in private sector, in foundations. So those sources can be used by City of Davis.
Thank you so much. And that actually is a great transition to talking about water and waste. And as Benjamin noted in the chat,
Carrie?
Yes, Colin?
Hi, this is Colin. I'm the current chair of the Tree Commission, and I just wanted to let you know that I posted a link in the chat for the tree canopy giveaway program that we were just talking about. So
Great.
Sorry to interrupt. I just wanted to let everyone know before we moved on.
No, I appreciate
thanks
that,
a lot.
Colin. Thank you. We do have another topic to talk about, and we had just kind of gotten going with a lot of excitement about talking about buildings, so I didn't want to cut it too short, but we can continue to give comments that either relate to both things, or to, I really want to have some time set aside to talk about water and waste. So we are again solving for some of the same issues, the greenhouse gas reduction, equity, etc. And the topic areas that we have in this conversation are water conservation, or anything related to water quality and conservation, stormwater and wastewater, which are two separate topics, but they're in the same column here. So that relates to keeping our stormwater clean, how we send our wastewater, how we conserve on not producing too much wastewater and sending it to the wastewater treatment plant, and then solid waste, which basically covers all of what are now the 5R topics: reduce, reuse, recycle, repair your appliances and other things rather than throwing away, and then compost or rot. So as well as that, we have the other category. And just so you know, I know that the buildings board got so full that it was hard to find a place to put things in there. We will be able to sort through all the comments. So it's fine to continue on down below, or span the line, or whatever. So I'd love to hear from people about their thoughts about water and waste. Yes, Larry. You were unmuted and then you muted yourself, Larry.
Sorry. Okay. Sorry. This pertains to Ying and also Scott's comment. There are many renters who wish their landlords would ante up for a gray water system, at least for their laundry water, because they're willing to discipline themselves and use a low phosphate soap, which is required. And if they were willing to do that, there's plenty of out-of-town landlords that should really come through and start helping renters, because the more people you get on board in saving water, then that will morph out into other areas of saving things for the benefit of the climate. And the other thing, other than putting trees in, is that because we've had so little rain, we have no moisture in the root zones of many trees. So we see a lot of stressed trees going on. And a lot of out-of-town landlords don't really care about keeping this place from becoming a heat island. So that we need to proportion some of the renters' water, and that might be an agreement between landlord and renters that they will keep the trees alive by watering them, because we're in that difficult zone right now. And so saving a tree that took years to grow is often far better than putting a little tree in that may not be watered by the successive renters or people. So that's the water comment that pertains to the previous two comments.
I think that's a really important topic, is that if renters have to pay for the water but have no incentive to keep their trees watered, how do we balance that between the landlord and the renter? Or what responsibility does the city have, especially for street trees? Those are watered by the homeowner or renter. So addressing those issues is important. Thank you, Larry.
I wanted to quickly and see if folk disagree with me on this, but Davis has some very special characteristics with respect to water. One of them is that we have a clay layer on the top of the soil. If you go in about 3 weeks, 3 feet, the transmissivity is much greater. And water that you flush down the toilet essentially goes out to a wetland and then is recycled back in. And Davis's toilet to tap cycle is about 3 years. So when you conserve water that you're putting into toilets or drains, it's not really a full-on conservation, because we're going to save that water anyway. Certainly, you burn some energy because we have to pump it up and then cycle it, and it costs us money. But we really have to look at the principle of water conservation is much like taxation. It's not so important how much you earn. It's important how much you keep. And not all conservation is the same. So if you go for a gray water system in Davis, you don't save much, because it's going to, if you just send it into the drains, it's going to go through the city processing, get cleaned up, which doesn't happen well with gray water, and then you're going to get the water anywhere. There are conservation strategies that you can take that bring new water into the system. That's like doing better on your impermeable surfaces. That water is not wasted because you don't evaporate it. And I think we really need to consider that facet of this, because you get to much different policy recommendations if you think about where that water is going. Just a thought.
So I think that kind of an overview of your comment is to make sure that with all of the actions that we address, that we're looking at intended and unintended consequences, and making sure that we're not creating situations that are more problematic than not. So, and that could relate to not just gray water, but all sorts of other energy and building actions as well. So thank you for that comment.
Gary, I guess I'd like to follow up and ask Gary to explain better, because I'm not sure that what you just said makes sense to me. Your general summary of it makes sense to me, but I'm not sure why he thinks gray water sounds like he thinks gray water is not a valuable strategy. So I guess I'm curious why he thinks that.
Sure, because the water boards have had real problems with gray water systems kind of going south. People don't really look at their detergent carefully or think about things. It does work in other parts of the state, but Davis has this unique recycling facet anyway, where we take it from groundwater and we put our waste back into groundwater. So you don't get much for taking on a risky strategy like gray water, where you could pollute that very groundwater that you're dependent on. So it feels like a much safer, smarter strategy to look at impermeable surfaces in Davis. That is, making certain that roof drains drain directly into the ground, which also helps with the trees because the transmissivity is higher at 3 feet. Thinking about those kinds of strategies gets you more in Davis. I would not argue that in other places in California, but because of our unique situation being pretty much groundwater dependent, except for some Sacramento River water right, we really are not well served by that kind of strategy versus other things we can do.
So,
I guess I would have to disagree with you on that.
I don't know that we have to go too deeply into this. We are, Gary, primarily on a surface water system now. That's a change in the last 5 years or so. And then the backup is groundwater. But your comments are still valid about making sure that we don't contaminate the aquifer. However, I think that since people are applying gray water in their own landscapes and there is a depth that the water needs to go down to replenish the groundwater system, it probably is getting cleaned on the way down. But again, I think that those unintended consequences are important to address. And
let me suggest that it is never cleaned on the way down, and one of the biggest groundwater problems is fertilizer, and you have that same kind of element in laundry detergent. So that is the biggest pollutant that we're dealing with. And yes, it's a backup, but remember also it's a greenhouse gas factor in that the higher the pump lift, the more greenhouse gas you're going to produce. So it's a twofer. If you get your groundwater table up, you have better reserve, which we could very well need given drought situations. And as well, you reduce your greenhouse gases substantially.
I guess I'd like to just ask Gary if you and I could chat offline sometime.
Yeah, Gary, I think that you also should look at the recent wastewater treatment plant and water reports that the NRC received from the Public Works Office, because they reported that there's about 360 pounds of GHG per acre foot of water that's used in the city. So if you're recycling the water around twice, that's going to double your GHG emissions versus if you just apply it once. If you reuse that water twice on site, you avoid those GHG emissions. So this isn't about water conservation. This is actually about GHG emission reduction. That's what the cap is about. So I think there's a difference between water use and between GHG emissions.
Yeah, and both facets are important. If you raise the water table, you lose some GHG, and yes, of course, it costs money to clean up the water and is better not to do that, but that's what I mean about numbers and trade-offs for all these policies.
So we have about 10 minutes left for this group discussion before we wrap up the workshop. We will be staying on afterwards if people need to have an interest in continuing the conversation. But I really do want to get the opportunity for some other people to bring up issues that they have or thoughts about water and waste. So any burning ideas that you'd like to bring up? Yes, Bernadette.
Under water conservation for outdoors, there's already the state ordinance, WELO, and the city of Davis is required by law to enforce it, but it's not being enforced. And just about everything on the board underneath there could be captured in a significant number of renovation projects, if that was just actually implemented by the city. So we don't need to change anything except use it as a tool. That's all.
Thank you. Other thoughts?
I think some thoughts on outdoor irrigation and getting that more efficient would also save water. Subsurface irrigation is a lot better in that you'll lose less to evapotranspiration, and again, you get it back into groundwater. So giving more information on that might be in some ways as important or more important than just drought-tolerant landscaping, as long as you're doing something reasonable.
Thank you. Is there anyone that has not had a chance to make a comment that has some thoughts about water and waste that you'd like to share?
I wanted to share one on impermeable surfaces. I was just calculating last night that if you look at, say, the size of a Davis roof, if you just allowed the downspouts to have good access to the groundwater in a Davis, that's about a 3-foot post hole. You're looking at about every 30 houses, about an acre foot of year, given Davis's 21-inch rainfall pattern. And that's really important water in that that's water that you get to keep. It's water that goes out and waters the trees because you get to keep that water that you amass in winter, and that stays accessible to the trees longer. So that's another kind of benefit. It's extremely cheap, depending on what it's going to cost you to dig a post hole under every drain. You could be looking at $200 per acre foot water, which is inexpensive. And then if you're looking at something like an atmospheric river storm and what would happen in that event, it's really nice to keep that water out of the stormwater system. So I just wanted to put that on the table as well.
Thank you. Do some of you mind in the last few minutes if I call on some people? Stacy, you've been to many of our workshops, and I'd love to hear some thoughts from you. Perhaps you've been entering things in the board, and if you don't want to talk, that's perfectly fine. But I'm giving you a chance to speak up what you think has been of value that you've heard, or that you have ideas on your own.
I think one of the comments that I put on was it would be great if we could train people how to offer the services. To me, a lot of it's, it's expensive sometimes to hire someone to even just get advice from. Mm-hmm. And if we could train people, then there would be more providers, and I think it would be like a job creation and, helping push out and lower the cost of a lot of the changes we're talking about.
That's a really great idea. So like, for example, with water efficient landscapes, the Arboretum has some model landscapes that can be used. And I know Bernadette has worked on some of those types of ideas with an organization that she's part of. So you could do that with many different types of programs, not just landscape and water, but other things. So
I think if you look at the Master Naturalist program, for example, mm-hmm. something like that could be a model.
Great. Thank you. Is there someone else that would like to speak? Martha, did you have some thoughts that you would like to share? Again, I'm calling out people, but if you don't want to say anything, just say no. We have probably about 3 more minutes of conversation before we wrap up the mural board part of the workshop. Yeah, Martha.
I really feel that taking stormwater and using that for the landscape is a really important one. Number of years ago, somebody in Village Homes was getting rid of some pickle barrels that they had, so I got the 4 of them or 3 of them and used them now. We have a direct from our gutters into those, and we can put it wherever we need it. When we have a lot, we just have a hose that comes directly out to the plants that need it, and we can use it in the summer to reduce the amount that we water. So
Great.
I think that's really good.
So that's both a water conservation and a reuse thing that you've done. So the more we can have less waste and water conservation in concert, that's great. Thank you. Jennifer.
I asked somebody about model water efficient landscape, and I would like to know more about how you get information on that. It's in the chat what the name stands for, but I'd like if someone could put something in about that.
So you can look it up online. It's essentially a program that requires landscapes, especially for new developments, to be water efficient. And there is a whole program of identifying which plants are water efficient, and they're ranked, and what types of design you use with mulch and irrigation and other things to make sure that you're conserving water. And every project is supposed to be reviewed to meet those standards. And the standards are related to different sizes of properties or projects. So there's quite a bit of information online on that. And it does have some good resources.
Is it used or supported in Davis?
Davis projects, when they are submitted for permits and review, are required to have information related to, as we call it, the MWillow requirements. I think that what Bernadette was referring to is that the review based on those requirements has been somewhat spotty. We don't necessarily have the key staff that has been needed to review that. It is in the drawings. People do have to prove that they have addressed those issues, and we do our best to review those, but it may not be every project in every way. So I have comments from Jennifer and then Ying, and then I think we may have to wrap this up.
Thank you, Carrie. I love all the ideas that I'm seeing here, and what I'm looking at when I'm seeing a lot of these ideas is a lot of things that are actually going to be addressed by some recent state law that goes into place in January. The SB 1383 organics regulations is going to address some of these things, which makes me happy. I love to see that people are behind those ideas, and I love these ideas about more community reuse centers. I'm very curious about ideas of how we can do more of those things. I love these ideas. So keep these ideas coming. This is great.
Thank you so much. And Ying, a final comment, and then we'll wrap up this portion of the workshop. You're on mute, Ying.
Hi, hello. Thank you, Carrie. I would like to briefly comment on Masa's way of water conservation and water reuse. I think that kind of practice can be scaled on the city level, and this idea is kind of described in there's a term for it. It's called green infrastructure, and I put a link from EPA on the green infrastructure. It's really about stormwater management, sustainable way of managing stormwater. So I put a link in the chat. And thanks a lot, Masa, for sharing that idea. Thanks, Carrie.
Thank you. Okay, so you will be able to continue to add comments to this board. If you go to the City of Davis Climate Action and Adaptation Plan website, which you can link to from the main City of Davis page, there will be a link to the mural boards that you can, and there will be a blank board to add additional comments to. Those comments that we have received today and on Wednesday night will be locked, but you can still look at them and respond and add new comments. So with that, I think we'll go on to next steps. And I know Diana Jensen is on the call, and we haven't had a chance to hear from her. Diana, do you want to wrap up with some next steps so everybody can hear your voice? Or do you want me to go ahead and do that?
I can do that. Thanks, Carrie. Yeah, I apologize for being late. I'm Diana Jensen, the city engineer and project director for the CAP. And so for our next steps, as Carrie said, the mural boards will be open for a while. Right now, it's August 4th. We are talking to our consultant about extending that a bit. And that'll be one board open for the mobility and infrastructure, or public spaces, and then the one that we just covered today. So those 2 boards will be open for a while. So you're welcome to put more comments in, or tell your neighbors or friends if they didn't get a chance to attend this meeting that there's still time to put comments on those boards. And then we also have a survey that is open until August 20th. So if you haven't had a chance to do that, you can get to that link from our main webpage. And then we will be adding all of those actions to our very large running list of actions that we are gathering. And then the next step will be to evaluate and begin to draft priorities from the GHG reduction opportunity, ability to improve equity, and what the community preferences are and priorities. And that information is what we are gathering from the surveys and workshops.
Great, thank you. I'm just typing in the city's web page. And our last action is, I think that's the next slide, Jennifer, is our basket, our farmers market basket. And we've done a random selection, and the only requirement is for the person to actually be in the meeting. And so let me see if the randomly selected person is in the meeting. No, I don't think so. So I'm going to go to the one up above that, and it looks like Lasya Kadiyala has been selected. So congratulations. We are very excited about our baskets, and I'll have to reach out to you. I hope I have not mispronounced your name too significantly. But we've had a lot of fun with having these baskets, and I know we have some people here that have already won them. So thank you so much to everyone for attending. We will stay on for a bit if people have things they still want to talk about, but that's the end of our regularly scheduled program. So thank you so much. Hi, Ken. And now I'm going to enter in the, if you go to that website, what you look for the CAP webpage is under the Spotlight section. You can just see Climate Action and Adaptation Plan. It's the 3rd button down, and that will take you directly to the CAP webpage, which has a wealth of information, including our online survey, which I hope that as soon as we finish up here, if you haven't had a chance to fill out the online survey, you can go directly to that. And many of the topics that we've talked about, both in the first 2 workshops a couple weeks ago and today, are in there. So further thought.
I have one quick question for you. You'd mentioned that we're using Sacramento River water. I was really surprised at that. Does Davis's water right extend in such a way that during this emergency we're able to draw river water? I had assumed that the system used Sacramento River water mostly in the wintertime, and then in the summer we were largely groundwater dependent. But we're drawing Sacramento River water substantially during this crisis.
So I can try to answer that. Our water right, you're correct. So for the most of it, the water right that the city of Davis was able to get with the city of Woodland is mainly in the wintertime. We have purchased additional water rights from upstream users that can be used during the summer months. During this drought right now, even those water rights are probably going to be ending because of the drought situation, which will require us to rely more on our groundwater. This is the first time since we've started using surface water that has happened. So it's hopefully a rare event that we lose both water rights.
All right, but that is the situation right now. You're looking at losing water rights, and it's going back onto the groundwater.
Right. Just for this season, it looks like that's what's going to happen. I'm not sure that's actually happened yet, but that's likely going to happen.
Okay, that's what I expected. Thank you.
Thank you, Diana. Any other thoughts from people? And thank you, Jennifer, for the link to the Davis water supply and drought updates. Also to Larry for your comment about planting new trees. You know, the City of Davis is updating our tree preservation ordinance and our urban forest management plan, as well as the tree shade ordinance, which is going to have some new details for tree planting. So all of those documents and practices are being brought up to current standards. And there is actually both the Tree Commission has been addressing that, as well as a special 2x2 committee that is comprised of natural resources commissioners and tree commissioners to talk about these guidelines. So
I was going to comment, I think it was Gary who mentioned subsurface watering. I don't know if the city who puts trees in our parkways, if they've ever thought of putting 4 pieces of PVC into the hole to encourage root growth and to stop growing weeds on top. And now that we have very little rain, the drain water from our downspouts could also go into those 4 ports. So we encourage those trees to get bigger sooner. So that just an idea that I've seen on some YouTube videos of people trying to better utilize the water in a subsurface manner.
So the results of that updated tree planting details will be available to the public once that document is updated. So thanks for that suggestion. And I would like to mention, I know some people have left, but we've had several people that have been helping us with recording the notes. So Benjamin, thank you for helping with that. And Kristen Henminer was on the call. She was helping as well. And Dago has also been one of our assistants, and he is no longer on the call at this point. But and thank you also to those of you that have been to multiple meetings. Again, we can stay on a little longer if people have thoughts that they would like to say and or introduce our consultant, Diana Edwards, who's on the call now. So you saw her in the introductory presentation. Thanks for coming on, Diana.
No problem. I just wanted to pop in and see if there was any clarifying questions that folks had.
Are the reports mentioned online, particularly that one about greenhouse gas for water that's recycled?
I'm not sure I have the answer to that question, Gary. I think that some of your summary of how water is used in Davis may need a little bit more definition or nuance. So the wastewater treatment plant water, now the treatment plant is actually treating the water in such a way that it's, Diana, correct me if I'm wrong, it is no longer necessary to put it through natural infiltration in wetlands. And so it's treated to such a point that it can actually go back into circulation. But that is the result of an updated, reconditioned wastewater treatment plant. Diana, I don't know that we really need to get into too much detail about this right now, but whether it is being released or being put into open space and habitat areas, it's not necessarily being recycled back into Davis use. That's the thing I wanted to correct. And I thought that that's what you were saying, Gary. I'm not sure if that's what you intended, but it does go down into the groundwater table and aquifer in some ways. But I think we can have an offline conversation about that if you'd like some more information.
I would, yeah. It typically anything that goes in the groundwater does come back sooner or later. It's about 5 years from the Sac River to Davis, if you're looking at the cycle there. So I don't know what it is, but yeah, we're going to see it again no matter what happens if it gets into the groundwater.
Other thoughts, questions, additions before we wrap up the meeting?
Gary, I put my email address in the chat. If you have questions specific about water or wastewater in more detail, just shoot me an email and we can have an offline discussion about it.
Mm-hmm. And also, Jennifer put the link into the document for your perusal. Before you talk to Diana, you can read that that document and then get some more information from that. Thank you, Jennifer. Okay. Other thoughts? Going once, twice. Really appreciate everybody being here, and this was a great workshop with fantastic ideas and very, very full boards. We ran out of space on the board, so thank you so much.